Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome in to the On Texas Football Tuesday live stream. Buckle up. If you're watching the baseball all-star game, turn down the sound and lock it in for an hour plus of rock-solid red meat Texas football, SEC football conversation. Rod Babers, CJ Vogel, and I am live on scene at the Omni Hotel in downtown Dallas. Day 2 of the SEC Media Days were today. Tomorrow, pretty big day. The Texas Longhorns contingent rolls in with Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers, the quarterback, of course, Kelvin Banks, and Jade Barron, the contingent for the Longhorns, one of 4 teams that will be here tomorrow. We'll recap the first 8 teams that we've talked to and heard from over the first 2 days, including Oklahoma today, Kirby Smart in Georgia today, obviously Josh Heupel in Tennessee today. Pretty great stuff here at the Omni Hotel, as they're calling it here in the SEC. The start, the beginning, the start of the 2024 college football season is right here with SEC Media Days 2024. Guys, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Looking forward to hearing some of these nuggets you guys have from being down there at SEC Media Days. I know it's very different. It feels very different than them Big 12 Media Days, man. There's a different, I think, kind of mojo happening with SEC Media Days. No question.
Yeah, I do too. And I want your thoughts, CJ, before we start hearing some of the sound from the coaches and players today, because I think that there were some headline conversations being had, and certainly more to come tomorrow. But, I remember I've been doing this long enough to when the Gosh, Charlie Strong was the coach for Texas the last time the Big 12 Media Days were held in this very building right here at the Omni Hotel. Very similar setup, but obviously this is now the SEC. And, of course, Big 12 took it over to AT&T Stadium and on the field there at Cowboy Stadium. This is more of that, but at the same time, I think you would agree, CJ, very polished. It's a big league operation. The who's who of college football are here, and the SEC runs a pretty tight ship. But the number one thing that you feel immediately, whether you're covering a team or talking about a team, is just the intensity of the fans and the media, the passion of what everyone is expecting. And it's amazing how, at least in my judgment so far, CJ and Rod, Nick Saban no longer being the coach at Alabama and the 12-team playoff being on tap, all these teams are talking about the 12-team playoff. I mean, they all are. They all think they should get there, including like Shane Beamer at South Carolina has that as a bar of his. It's like, okay, but it's like there's blood in the water with Alabama. That I think people assume maybe sliding a little bit down. Georgia and Texas is the favorites, but a lot of teams want to make a run at the SEC. I think this could be their year to crack that playoff, which is a pretty fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it certainly is. And to your point about the who's who, right? I mean, Nick Saban, Paul Feinbaum, anybody that you think about when it comes to college football, they're out strolling around. Josh Pate, J.D. Pickell, I got to meet him today. Great, time talking and chatting with him a little bit. Listen, it does mean more, and you see it. I know that slogan's used all too often, and it kind of gets annoying to folks outside of the SEC, but when you see it and you experience it, there is a little bit more to what the SEC has to offer. And we certainly have gotten a taste over the first 2 days here. And with Texas speaking tomorrow, I'm very excited to see what they can provide with Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Jade Barron making the trip up to Dallas. Should be very exciting. Of course, that college football 12-team expanded playoff is a topic of conversation for everybody, Aaron. To your point, you never know, which coach is going to bring it up, right? Because in the SEC, all it takes is 9 wins in my eyes, and a really strong resume with 9 wins in this conference will probably get you into the college football playoff, or at the very least consideration to make it into the college football playoff. And at that point, who knows? We've heard it time and time again at that, once you're in, who knows what's going to happen. They put their pants on just as everybody else does.
Yeah. I think what you guys are feeling, like I said, I'm not there, you guys are in it, is for the first time in a long time, there's a lot more hope in the SEC because more teams have a chance. Now that's the case nationally too, but in the SEC, of course, we know they're probably going to get more teams in than any other power conference. And the GOAT Nick Saban is gone. He's still there physically, literally, but he's no longer coaching Alabama. Nick Saban's dominance, they won 9 of the last 15 SEC titles or something crazy like that, right? 3 of the last 4 SEC titles. Alabama's won those, right? Alabama's won 4 of the last 6. So that's what I think you guys are feeling, is that there's hope, not only because the playoff is expanded, so more SEC teams got a shot, but also, man, Nick Saban's gone. The GOAT is gone. So the number one apex predator in the SEC is no longer, haunting people's nightmares and coaches' nightmares in that conference. He is gone. So now there's a new hope in the SEC. I think that's kind of the feeling.
I would add one other thing to that, Rod and CJ, is the portal and the ability to build depth and have experience. I mean, experience is currency now in college football. Depth is currency. That's one of the reasons Shane Beamer was talking optimistically about his team, and that he feels like they've got a bunch of 22, 23-year-old fifth and sixth year players that are there. They've added some pieces where they had some depth issues through the portal, and it kind of across the board. Ole Miss loaded up in the portal and are excited about their campaign, because I do think the sense I get, and I think you phrased it perfectly, Rod, there's hope. The hope is Georgia is the number one team. Everybody assumes Texas, but boy, if Texas falters at all, who's going to be that next group? And Ole Miss wants it. LSU wants it. Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz were talking about it today, coming off an 11-2 season. I mentioned Shane Beamer in South Carolina. I mean, Tennessee and Josh Heupel, they think they're going to bounce back to from what they were a year ago. It is really, really exciting to be a part of it. And I like the idea because Rod and CJ, we talk about Texas as an arrogant program. The arrogance of Texas has always been carried against them. Well, this is arrogance meets arrogance. Like this conference is arrogant. This conference holds its chest out big. It just means more. So you've got the collision of the Texas arrogance with the arrogance of confidence, but arrogance of we're all really good. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and it leads to a really good conversation, and it should lead to some great football in about 6 weeks.
One of my favorite things looking into this SEC, right, is who's going to take that step back, because someone's going to have to. Right?
That's right.
Texas 12 wins a year ago. OU 10 wins a year ago. Alabama, Georgia, both on the cusp of making the college football playoff. Alabama did. Missouri impressed. Tennessee's on the come up. LSU 9 wins. Someone's going to have to sit back and take some losses. And it's one of those things in the 12-team conversation. I think you can make the argument that, hey, these probably 6 teams are all talent-wise deserving of that spot in that conversation, or at least in that preseason consideration, right? Ole Miss, what they've done out of the portal, to your point, Aaron. I mean, Lane Kiffin mentioned it Monday. He mentioned free agency 10 different times when he talked about the portal and some of the additions he's made to his roster this offseason. He understands what the portal is, and it's him, and it's his kind of roster and program understand that, hey, the portal is going to help us. Jared Ivey called it straight up. Yeah, he said, Ole Miss has gone all in this year when it comes to building around what it has on campus. And that's a really good offensive line and a third-year starting quarterback, similarly to what Texas is sitting at. So when you sit at it or look at it right now, because it's interesting, the preseason top 25 will come out August 12th, but the preseason SEC rankings will come out Friday afternoon. And that's going to be really interesting to see how these teams kind of shake up within one another, because someone at some point is going to be the 6th, 7th, or 8th team in the conference. And they're going to sit back and say, why is this the case? We just won 10 games a year ago. We're thinking we have a shot at the playoff. Why are we all of a sudden the 7th or 8th team in this conference? It wasn't like this recently, and that's more to the conversations that we heard a few times this past over the last 48 hours, Aaron. And that's Texas and Oklahoma are not coming to this conference to just be guys that y'all can walk over. And I think Texas fans understand that. Oklahoma fans are expecting that. But SEC fans, I think the more that they get familiarized with the rosters and the coaching staffs at each programs going into 2024, they're starting to realize too, these teams are going to be pretty tough to beat. And it's going to be even more challenging for a South Carolina, a Missouri, a Tennessee, who's come so close, but yet to really get over the hump there to do exactly that with Texas and Oklahoma now in the SEC conference.
Interesting. Yeah, to your point of who's going to regress, because they can't all go 9-3 or 10-2. I mean, somebody's got to lose these games. I mean, that's just the way that goes. It's a winner and a loser on a football field, Rod. And my best guess, just looking at it over 2 days and looking forward to 2 more, I think Ole Miss is really good. Even Nick Saban said today that he feels like their lines of scrimmage have finally, put itself with depth and with experience up there with the best teams in the SEC. That's always been their issue, Nick Saban said when talking about Lane Kiffin's team. The team I would be most concerned about, and it's the table right next to mine here, and that's Oklahoma. Because when you talk to the folks at OU, brand new offensive line across the board, brand new quarterback in Jackson Arnold, who's really talented but hasn't played distinctly I think Quinn Ewers year one kind of thing, right? I mean, he's going to take some lumps, especially behind an offensive line that's going to have to come together. And even the Oklahoma folks aren't sure who the running back is going to be. Gavin Sawchuk is the leading contender. They're concerned about being able to run the football. They think the receiver position's solid, but then their defense, I mean, they think it's the best they've had in 10 or 15 years, but they have depth issues on defense. They start suffering some injuries on that side of the ball. They're in trouble. That would be the team I would look at and say, you know what, that might be 7-5. That might be 8-4 for me. But to your point, someone's got to regress. Someone's got to come back a little bit. Who do you think that might be, Rob? What are you looking at as far as teams that are likely to be vulnerable and you think take a step forward? I think it's Ole Miss going forward, and I think it's maybe Oklahoma coming back a little bit.
Yeah, there are a couple of teams that they're kind of swing teams in the SEC. Honestly, I think both the Texas rivals, A&M and Oklahoma, can be swing teams like that. I could see Oklahoma, being a team that struggles because they have, what is it? I believe you put out that 38 new scholarship players, CJ.
Yeah,
that's a lot of new players, man, at crucial, critical positions, at quarterback, the entire offensive line. They're going to replace both coordinators. I don't know if anybody in the SEC is dealing with as much turnover as they're going to deal with. So, I mean, I could see them stumbling, but I mean, Brent Venables, I could see him proving himself as a coach if that offense can come anywhere close to where they were last year. And, I think that Jackson Arnold can, have some consistency and develop a baseline. That defense, as you point out, is going to be good. That's one of the more opportunistic defenses. They're going to make a lot of plays. They got, 2 All-Americans and studs in that defense. Their back seven is going to be really talented. Maybe some questions about the front. Their back seven is going to be pretty talented for Oklahoma. So I could see them either making a leap or I could see them regressing. A&M's kind of the same thing. I mean, new coach, new offensive system there. There's a lot of hype about Connor Wigman. If he can stay healthy, that defense for them is going to be pretty good. They probably are more stout on the lines of scrimmage. So they can end up making a run, especially if they get through those first 4 or 5 weeks of the season unscathed. You can see the Aggies making a run until they get to the Longhorns late in the season and be a pretty good team. So I can see them struggling to make a bowl game, or I can see them, a 8-9 win team by the time they play Texas. And I think Oklahoma and Texas A&M feel like swing teams to me in the SEC. So I think those are 2 teams that are primed either for regression or maybe you could see them make a leap, but for a first-year coach and for a lot of turnover for Oklahoma, that could end up being tough for them.
Yeah, turnover both places. Also for Oklahoma, CJ, 2 new coordinators, right, both sides of the ball. It's Seth Luttrell taking over the offense, the former North Texas head coach. He was a fullback on that national championship winning team at Oklahoma back in 2000. Defensively, they've turned it over to pretty much Brett Venables, but he brought in the young guy from Jacksonville State who had been with him at Clemson. So continuity, as Sark talks about, I think all coaches believe in that. Continuity, the turnover on the roster, as Rod mentioned, and then, new coaches and coordinators, new quarterback, a lot of issues for Oklahoma and a very, very difficult schedule. You got to throw the schedule on top of that. I've said all along, and we've talked about it. If Texas had OU's schedule, I would be much less optimistic about the Longhorns. The Longhorns got dealt a good hand as far as that goes. Oklahoma's got to deal with the top of the conference, the LSU's, Tennessee, Alabama. It's going to be a real Texas, of course. Super challenging schedule for them in 2024. So a lot of fun here. What struck you today with Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs, CJ? They're the prohibitive favorites. What'd you take from what you learned from Carson Beck, took from Kirby Smart and the other Bulldogs that were here?
Yeah, of course. I was really interested to seeing what Kirby Smart had to say. And I've got to be completely honest. Rod, I hear the stories of Mac Brown all the time and how he's, a car salesman when it comes to selling his program, selling the experience of being a Texas Longhorn and what he can do for you. I get that same kind of vibe when I listen to Kirby Smart. And I know this was the first time I was able to see him live and in person, but there's just a certain charisma to him. And I think it's one, the confidence in which has built over the last 4 or 5 seasons in Athens, Georgia, the roster and talent he's been able to build and accumulate. But 2, there's something about the way that he's able to sit there and say nothing else that we've ever done matters except for what we do week 1 and moving forward into the 2024 season. And Georgia players today specifically spoke about it several times. It's like, yeah, we play Texas, we play Alabama. We're excited that Texas and OU are in the conference, but nothing matters. Because we've got Clemson week 1. Nothing matters. And so it's fun to sit there and see the recurring trends with those guys. And you can go back to when they won their second consecutive title, and what did we hear again? We've talked about this several times. What did we hear from every Georgia player after they won that title? No one believed in us. No one thought we could get back to where we were. Folks thought we fell off. And I was like, hold on. No, they didn't. You were the number one ranked team in the country coming into the season. You went wire to wire as the best team in the country. No way did people ever doubt you. But that's what Kirby Smart does for his program. He gets them motivated. He gets them ready. And that mindset is just to not take anything for granted, right? It worked in 2022, and I see it right now. They're not looking past what's happening week one. Carson Beck, I don't know how good Quinn Ewers is. I haven't watched any film. Why? Because I'm focused on Clemson. That's what's happening first and foremost. So it's really interesting. I've appreciated it, and I see why the success has been so often for Clemson and for Georgia and Kirby Smart since really, the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's an edge to his program. He's on a better pace right now than Nick Saban was at his age. I mean, he's 48 years old. He already got 2 national titles already. So you could argue that he's on a pace that is as good, if not better, than Nick Saban was, depending on what metric you're looking at. And so I'm not saying he's going to end up in the GOAT territory, but he's off to a hell of a start. And I'm with you. There's an edge to his program. His programs are really cutting edge. He stays on top of a lot of the kind of evolutionary adaptations in the game, so it doesn't get stale. He has even talked about it here at SEC Media Days, how he studied different organizations and companies and their secrets. And Phil Knight and Nike was one of the companies that he went to study, and their successful habits, tendencies, philosophy as an organization, and how he can translate that to football. He is, there's no doubt. I mean, that's going to be the standard for Texas and for Sark too. And it's great that you get a chance to go up against who is considered to be the best coach in college football right now, with Nick Saban retiring.
Yeah, and he talked about how it's maybe the fastest team he's had on the field, not on the road, not on the highways, not on the streets. Their overall
they probably could have driven it down at the same time it took to fly. So
well done.
Speeding is the best that they've had under Kirby Smart, but he did address that today. They've been fined, and he's not proud of what's going on, but they need to get that under control. Seems like they have a drag racing team in addition to a football team there at Georgia right now. So we'll keep an eye on that. But they are the prohibitive favorites. They were here today, but as you said, CJ and Rod, very focused. They understand championships aren't given; they're earned and taken. And it does. I came off really impressed with Carson Beck today. Got a good head on his shoulders. And I think you were standing right there, CJ, when he was addressing. When he didn't get the starting job ahead of Stetson Bennett a couple years ago, and he talked about how at 19 years old he didn't handle that very well. He was a little bit immature, but he kind of felt sorry for himself. But in the end, now he looks back on it and realizes that Stetson Bennett outperformed him in camp, won the job, and he had to take that. And he says he's back now, a couple years later after watching Stetson lead them to another national championship. He got the first year last year. I thought that was pretty insightful that at 21 now, he's been on campus for a while. There's a leadership role that he feels like he's stepped into, which is something we talk about with Quinn Ewers as well here at Texas.
Yeah, definitely. I was impressed with Carson Beck at the Manning Passing Academy when I got to sit down and chat with him for a little bit, as well as today. Just kind of being around him more and more, I get a clearer picture of the kind of mentality he has and the character that he possesses as well. And when he was talking about Stetson Bennett earning the start, in 2021 for the season opener against UAB, I was, again, very impressed, because that's tough. That's not an easy thing to do. You battle it out all camp, all offseason, all spring, and you sit there and, you're going into game week 2 days out on a Thursday from the season opener against UAB, and you're sitting there, and this is Carson Beck saying, I thought I was the starter. I thought I had done enough. I was of the mindset that I was going to be the quarterback number 1 for the Georgia Bulldogs to begin 2021. Friday afternoon comes around, and it's announced that it's going to be Stetson. And it took me aback, and he was asked, what did he do? He said, nothing. I didn't talk to anybody. I wasn't happy. It blew my mind almost that I was not the starting quarterback. And he got in late in that game. I believe Georgia actually won 56-7 or something like that. So he did get to play late in the game. He went 4 for 10 for about 50 yards or so. But he said at that point in those next 2 seasons, it was pretty difficult to sit back and watch. Because again, you're a really talented football player if you end up at Georgia, and it happens across the country. These guys want to get on the field. They want to experience being the guy because that's all they've been their entire careers, right? So he said a lot of maturation took place, and Kirby applauded him this morning again. He could have got up and left, and in today's college world of football, most guys do. So he gave Stetson, or he gave Carson Beck a lot of credit, and really tipped his cap there because it is impressive to sit back, wait your turn. He's going into year 5 right now. This is only the second year in which he is the guy. So a lot of maturation took place over the last 2 years. And I've just been very impressed with the way that he's handled all of that, because I can imagine losing the starting job and then seeing your school and your program go on to win a national championship that year. That can't be easy for your confidence to know that, I probably wasn't as good as that quarterback in the success that they had that year. So again, really, really impressed by what I saw today and this week, this month, really, dating back to the Manning Passing Academy of Carson Beck.
Yeah, that's well said. 5th year, lesson for a lot of guys to stick through. And Rod, you can speak to that because Garrett Nussmeier at LSU is another one who's waited his turn behind Jaden Daniels, who came in. He's been there. Grew up son of a coach. He's an LSU fan. He can't wait to always dreamed of being the quarterback of the LSU Tigers. And here he is. He's going to get his chance behind a great offensive line at LSU. Carson Beck has waited his turn. We're already having that conversation about Arch Manning here in Austin, waiting his turn. So many quarterbacks bounce, or players at every position bounce when it's not their time. I think that's a sign of a healthy program, whether it's Texas, LSU, or Georgia, that they're keeping their talent. They want to be there.
Yeah, no, it is. It's tougher than ever before. All right, quarterbacks via the transfer portal are making more money than ever before to help stabilize other programs. Whether you believe it or not, remember Jay Norvell said that his quarterback was offered upwards of $600,000 to go to K-State. Whether you want to believe it or not, but I will say some of the figures that more credible sources like Open Doors have thrown out there and 247 Sports that's what your quarterbacks are worth these days. Top 25 quarterbacks. They're worth about $500,000 or a little bit more, and that's just going to increase. So, there's a lot of temptation for these quarterbacks if they're not playing. I believe the blue chip quarterback transfer rate is upwards of 60%. So if there's a blue chip quarterback on your campus, there's about a 60% chance they're going to end up transferring. If you can keep those guys, not even their entire careers, that's tough, but keep them long enough to help you stabilize things. Now, best case scenario for Carson Beck, he waited his turn, and he's going to be drafted really high and play at a really high level, and that's what you would like. But even if you can get him like Texas has with a guy like Malik Murphy to stay long enough to help you stabilize the position as a whole and provide some depth, give you some key starts when you need it if a guy is hurt. Shane Buechele did that with Texas, right? Even though he ended up leaving, stayed long enough to help Texas stabilize the quarterback position a little bit. And that's Hudson Card is another one. Like that, if you can't get a guy to stay the entire time, which that's getting tougher and tougher to do, but that's best case scenario, you like for him to stay long enough to help you just stabilize the position, get another young guy in the rotation and some reps. And so you can keep that quarterback position just healthy overall, just a healthy position unit and a position room, not just your starter these days. As we know here in Texas, you need to make sure your backup's ready to go. There's a good chance he's going to provide you Crawley Webb. The more games you're going to play, the more opportunities that your quarterback's going to be exposed, and you're going to need your backup quarterback to make a play or go out there and have a credible and a capable start. So I think ultimately, that's a test for any program. And it is, I think, a sign of a healthy program. If you can keep, because everybody's going to lose quarterbacks these days. Nobody's going to be able to keep them. That's more money, more problems. Right? Every great program is going to lose a great quarterback here or there. That's just the reality of it. Like I said, how long can you keep them within the program to help you stabilize things? I think that is kind of the test ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said about your backup has to win you a game. Nick Saban on ESPN television yesterday, or the SEC network, whichever was aired on, I was standing there watching them. Wasn't watching on TV. I was standing right at the broadcast site. Picked Texas to be in the SEC championship game and cited obviously the roster, but also said if something does happen to the quarterback, Quinn Ewers, he really thinks Arch Manning's ready to step in and help them win a game or two if he needs to. That is the depth of that position right now at Texas. And CJ, a lot of returning quarterbacks. We've learned that in the first 8 teams. Missouri bringing their quarterback back that went 11-2 last year. Obviously Carson Beck's back for another year. A lot of these guys that have stayed. Nussmeier, he didn't start last year, but he's been in that program and is ready to take his turn. Experience at the quarterback position so far, one of the themes of SEC Media Days. And we'll get into what's to come. Obviously, tomorrow is a huge day here on the On Texas Football Tuesday live stream. Texas is one of the 4 teams, or the last team actually, that roll in here. If you've been paying attention to our coverage here, it's two coaches and their players in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. Kalen DeBoer in Alabama will be the first up tomorrow. Obviously, a lot of eyeballs on Kalen taking the job. Nick Saban will be in the building. That will be, I don't say awkward, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Kalen DeBoer to take over that program. Obviously, Jeff Levy and Mississippi State will be here. First-year head coach coming in from Oklahoma. And then in the afternoon, it's Billy Napier at Florida. And then Texas and Steve Sarkisian wrap up the Wednesday final big press conference about 2:20 tomorrow afternoon. CJ, you had some audio from Brett Venables today. One of the big conversations surrounding college football is the new rules changes with headset communications, the ability for the coach to talk to the player with the helmet on, whether it's the quarterback and then eventually the linebacker or the captain on defense, but also the ability to have tablets on the sidelines to watch plays. And what you learned today from Brett Venables and some of the other folks about the new rules and new technology?
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a really interesting conversation. It was a great question. It was asked by Colin Wilson of the Action Network. We had a little chat earlier this week about what kind of strengths and weaknesses this would bring to the world of college football. We'll play the clip and we'll get into it. Just Brent Venables talking about the additions of in-helmet communication with the player on the defense as well as the offense, plus on-field sideline tablets that you can now watch full clips from. Previously, it was just 4 still images.
Yeah, I mean, in regards to the new legislation passing the sideline tablets, it's going to be able to show live video. I think it's a great resource. I think making sure you have very limited amount of time to coach through these moments on the sideline, it will be useful in some ways, and you just want to make sure that it's not distracting in other ways. In regards to the helmet communication, I think it's going to allow offenses to be even more efficient. Again, you only have it on one guy on defense. It's a little different than the NFL. Now, there's a few teams in the NFL that do a little bit of tempo at times, but it's a little bit different from a defensive perspective. And again, sometimes, too much communication can be a bad thing too. And so there you'll find that balance as a program and as a player. Some players will receive it better than others, but it can be a real competitive advantage to me offensively to be able to be in the ear of the quarterback 15 seconds prior to snapping the ball, and then having Danny back, it's tremendous. I mean,
I thought that was really interesting, that last sentence there, right? Too much communication might be an issue.
Yeah,
and it might be a little overwhelming. That's interesting because we hear about it all the time, about the offensive side of the ball. What can Jalen Milroe do when Kalen DeBoer's in his ear for 25 seconds? What can Quinn Ewers do when it's Sarkisian? Out west, what Miller Moss, what Lincoln Riley can do in his ear. But we're not yet talking about what that means for a Danny Stutzman or an Anthony Hill when they have their defensive coordinators in their ear at that time, right? What does Texas love to do on first possessions? Well,
yeah,
it's throw screens. It's get the ball out quick. It's the RPOs, the bang 8 routes. If you're, a Brent Venables sitting in the ear of a Danny Stutzman right now, a guy who has been tremendous at getting his defense where it needs to be, lined up correctly, and understand the down and distance and the situation of the game. But now you get to talk to him for 25 extra seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so, 5 seconds or so after the play call comes in, the scheme, the formation, the look, the coverage, whatever. But now you get to sit there and say, hey, if the 2 goes in motion across the line of scrimmage, he's going to reverse orbit motion back around, and it's going to be a swing screen. You would not have no idea if that was going to be the case or not without this helmet communication. So my conversation this week, it was interesting because it's so offense driven of what are these guys going to do? If that Sam Backer blitzes, yeah, you're going to have the swing route. Well, that works both ways. If motion comes one way and he settles on the right hit of your tight end nub right there, what's coming. And so I thought it was really interesting. I think it's with the way that we've seen Oklahoma and Venables, I know the conversation is about signs and how much communication that they're able to get from opposing offenses. But for Venables and some of these defensive first guys sit there and really have an idea of what's to come, I thought it was really interesting because Kirby Smart had another great answer. When he was asked, your cutting edge defense is so unique. Is that you reacting to offenses and what they do, or do you have to be proactive and kind of dictate what they do? And he goes, well, it's a bit of both, but I love to be the aggressor in this situation. I love to be the guy that goes out there and makes them react to my will backer, my cornerback, my safety, my edge, and have them dictate and game plan around them. So if you're Brent Venables or Kirby Smart and you have that option now to dictate what's going on and have that extra communication, I think it's going to be really interesting with how that's used this year. And of course, it's the first time that we'll see it. So who knows how much it'll favor one side of the ball or the other. Will tempo completely erase it? Will it eradicate it to the sense that you need sideline signs once again? We'll have to wait and see. But really interesting conversations I've had with a few folks this week in regards to the helmet communication.
No, that's great stuff, CJ. I would even say that it depends. It's matchup based, right? If you're going up against a guy like Stutzman, who is a stud, high football IQ, great at processing, diagnosing plays pre-snap, you might want to increase the tempo so he doesn't have as much time to communicate with Venables. And in between snaps, you might want to make sure you're putting a lot more pressure on them so that, he can't give him those tidbits pre-snap. Because I agree with you. There are certain guys, really high football IQ guys, talk about people, coaches being problem solvers. And I talk about, defenders being football investigators. You don't want the coach who's a really great problem solver to be able to talk directly to his best football investigator on defense and tip him off on some of those plays. Because a lot of the coaches, they know based on, like you said, a lot of the trends and the tendencies. Oh man, that double slant's coming up here. Oh man, looks like a smash route here. And then you can give that to your inside linebacker 5 seconds before he give it to the nickel and the safety. And then boom, you guys are, obviously working with a huge advantage. So I'm with you. I think depending on the matchup, I'd go tempo to try to eliminate some of that communication. That's a great point. And it also reminds me of that quote you had from Jackson Dart yesterday when he was asked about the transition of quarterbacks into the SEC and how he said basically it's less of the drop 8 philosophy that you see in the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And they're more obviously dictating the terms and dictating the tempo. They're more of the aggressor here. And that's kind of what Kirby Smart was talking about there now. We don't react. We're more proactive. And I think that's also something that can be aided by the communication that you have between the sideline now and the defense. So it's going to be interesting to see how the defense approaches it. Offense, I think you'll get sideline, you'll get the sideline boards, right? Of the signal boards, you'll get those. And I think you'll also get the headset communication with offense for pretty much every major program. Defense, how they do the communication on defense is going to be interesting because you partially are somewhat, that's somewhat dictated by the tempo of the offense in terms of how you're going to communicate.
One other quick point. I heard Kirby Smart mention it, and maybe Venables. It was one of the two defensive guys that they said, we only have one player with the helmet communication. So does that actually help us that much? If you're going against a Michigan that likes to take out some of the clock and you'll see that ball snapped with 6, 7, 8 seconds left. Yeah, I think it will. But if you go against an Oklahoma or a Jeff Lebby offense that likes to go super quick, I think it's kind of counterproductive because then you have a central point. And I had a Division I Power 4 head coach text me earlier this offseason. He said, yeah, it was great earlier this year, right? We had 3 guys on defense when we were testing this out with helmet communication. We had a safety, we had a linebacker, we had a defensive lineman. We could communicate with everybody, and they could communicate with their own personal groups and get the front situated the way that we see fit. It didn't need to be, let's all huddle up around Ray Lewis and have him be the guy that gives us the call. No, Ed Reed could have it. Haloti Nada. I mean, you get what I'm saying here. Everybody, it's in that case, if it's just one guy, why is it that you could make the case that it's easier to just go like this? Yeah, and go line up that way, right? I mean,
No, you're right.
Everybody gets it.
It's interesting. So we'll see again what that means in 2024. But Yeah, I think there's still some changes to occur and evolve with this rule setting that we've seen with the helmets and the tablets.
It's a really good conversation for sure. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow. I mean, CJ, make a note. Wondering, you say Anthony Hill will have the helmet, but it can be anybody, right? It could be Jahdae Barron if you want to put it in his helmet. I mean, he's one of the smartest players on the Texas football team. Does as much film study. I think that's the case, right? You can choose who you want to have that helmet on that side of the ball. Interesting, because Jahdae would be a great person to ask that question tomorrow about how that will go. And certainly Sark, who, to the point of the SEC and the more aggressive defenses, he's been in this conference before. He understands it, maybe more than a Brett Venables or coaches that have not been in the SEC before. He understands it, and knows Kirby Smart very, very well, for sure, without a doubt. So it's the On Texas Football channel. It's our Tuesday live stream. I am live, as you can see behind me, at SEC Media Days here at the Omni Hotel. CJ Vogel was here all day today, made his way back to his where he's staying, and then Rod is back in Austin. But guys, the conversations roll on. This whole – one of the things I heard today, Carson Beck, and I think you were standing there, CJ, he was talking about his offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo, talks super loud, because he's like deaf. And he said, man, he was like in my ear. I could take my helmet off and I could still hear him yelling at me. We had to get that thing turned down. It's going to be really interesting to see how these quarterbacks deal with it. Because, sometimes the coach will overdo it. Sometimes you miss a play, miss something. That is one of the big conversations in college football this year. CJ, any more audio you wanted to play from what you pulled today, or do you want to move forward to what we're expecting from Texas tomorrow?
No, that'll work for today. We had another clip with Kirby Smart talking about NIL, but I think we understand what's going on in the world of NIL, and Georgia's no stranger to landing big 4 or 5-star guys. So let's move on to what is expected tomorrow, because I'm really, of course, encouraged and excited to hear about Sarkisian and this group coming in for the Longhorns tomorrow.
All right, I want to talk about that with you guys, what you're expecting, questions you would like to hear answered, and things that we can certainly ask. And if you have a question here on the Super Chat or the chat that you'd like us to ask tomorrow, we will certainly try to fit that in and make that happen as we get this thing going tomorrow with the Longhorns taking center stage. And I can tell you, having talked to a lot of folks, the media that cover the other 15 schools here in the SEC are excited about Texas, and talking to Sark, talking to Quinn Ewers. There's going to be a rock star vibe, I think, around it, much like we saw with Kirby Smart today. Which is pretty cool. Hey, I want to tell you that when it comes to protecting your stuff, all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? A lot of us, we have a lot of stuff, right? And you want to know if you're in good hands. With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. If you're not actually sure, here's some good news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, your biggest asset, your car, your boats, your motorcycles, RVs, ATVs, everything, all the way down to your golf clubs, for crying out loud. If you're looking for someone local to the Austin Round Rock area, please give All-State agent Mark Saunders and his office a call tomorrow or whenever you can. 512-218-8571. 512-218-8571. You see the number there on the screen. Ask yourself again, am I in good hands? Everything protected. Is it as hassle-free as it should be? With more than 35 years of experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. 512-218-8571. There it is right there. Appreciate Mark and his partnership on the Tuesday night live stream on the On Texas Football channel, live from SEC Media Days. It's Red Meat Football Conversation. This says, guys, I apologize for the interruption, family, but hook 'em and salute to lifetime Longhorns. There you go. That's not
anytime, UT boy. Anytime.
Appreciate that, brother. Hey,
woo. How about that one?
Hey, see? Hey, UT boy, I appreciate that, brother. See? God bless you.
Hey, Rod, be update. How many diapers are you going through a day these days?
Oh man, too many. And she's growing, so she's outgrowing the diapers that we already buy. So we got to buy more diapers. So UT boy, much appreciated, brother. Appreciate that love, La Familia, baby. Yeah.
All right, Sark here tomorrow. Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Jahdae Barron. What's your expectation here, CJ? What do you expect from Sark tomorrow when he takes the stage? I will say this: observations from 2 days. He will be more charismatic than Clark Lee, the Vanderbilt coach, because Clark Lee was as uncharismatic and less dynamic than any coach I may have ever seen. It was the last coach of the day on Tuesday or Monday, and I was ready to go to bed. And I was like, oh man, this is like the guy in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'm drooling on the table. He is not very charismatic, but Sark will be. Sark will bring it, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of excitement in him being back in this conference and love he has for, Alabama and everything. It's going to be pretty cool tomorrow to see Sark return, but bring Quinn Ewers with him and a more mature, third-year starter Quinn Ewers and two of his best players, one on offense, one on defense. Should be a lot of fun tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it, and I did think it was very funny, right? You saw the big crowds for Oklahoma. Can only imagine what they're like for Texas tomorrow, right? Jackson Arnold had a media scrum, probably 40 people deep, I'd say. It was pretty crowded. But in terms of, kind of the anticipation for Texas to stroll into this conference, Aaron, you're here. You hear all the Texas questions that are asked to every single coach that steps on this podium. It's a lot. It happens pretty often. Very rarely so far out of the 8 coaches, I think only one of them has dodged a true Texas question in terms of what does it mean for the Longhorns to be in this conference? Are they, quote unquote, going to run this conference? Was also asked at some point this week as well. So the anticipation is there. I'm sure the headlines will be generated almost immediately with whether Sarkisian says something or Quinn Ewers says something. But I think above anything, it'll be a great opportunity for the University of Texas to become familiarized with the SEC, right? It's one thing to step into this conference and compete. It's another thing to come in with the expectation to win it. And I think right now with where Texas is at and the expectation is to compete or be in the conversation to be in the SEC championship game, it comes to a different level than what we're seeing with Oklahoma right now. And, again, as Oklahoma had a tremendous media turnout, folks were all over Brent Venables, Jackson Arnold, Billy Bowman. Danny Stutzman was actually a really fun guy to listen to this afternoon as well. But I think it's going to be a little bit different when it's Quinn Ewers and Sarkisian on the mound, kind of fielding questions, if you will, because those are the guys that attract. They're coming off the playoff. They're coming off of a top 4 finish in the entire country. Those are the guys that you're expected to compete with Georgia at the very top this year. And folks are eager to see what they have to say about joining this conference after winning the Big 12 a year ago. And, of course, all the noise and baggage that comes with the Longhorn logo now in the SEC.
Yeah, we haven't had much bulletin board material from the SEC media days yet. I mean, obviously, Nick Saban's quote about Texas not running the SEC that made some headlines. I think it was Harold Perkins who was asked about Danny Stutzman, right? And he's like,
"Yeah, Rod, hold on. Why would Harold Perkins have known who Danny Stutzman was?"
Come on. I really don't know. I don't. So I don't even know if that was bulletin board material, but it was. It
made the rounds, certainly. Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we haven't had really any of that. And Sark's not going to give you any of that. I mean, Sark's way too savvy for that. Quinn, remember the only thing Quinn has ever said really that was close to bulletin board material recently, he said that Texas was everybody's Super Bowl. And if you listen to the actual quote, he was led into the question. I believe the guy asked him, "Hey, is Texas everybody's Super Bowl?" And he was like, yeah, Texas. So he just kind of agreed with him and went on with it. So I don't think maybe Quinn can be led into some bulletin board material. I think right now he's pretty much too veteran of a presence and too savvy for that as well.
Yeah. What's interesting about that question, sorry, Aaron, to cut in, but Cody Clareman, one of our On Texas Football guys behind the scenes, he asked Danny Stutzman today, he said, you saw Quinn's comments about Texas as being everybody's Super Bowl. What do you think about that? And Danny Stutzman, I mean, he has a Longhorn tatted on him upside down to make a point. He made the shirts after the win last year. He was smoking the cigars. He's as outspoken as they get. He goes, I would be lying to you right now if I said I didn't think about it every offseason. Every day of the offseason, I want to beat Texas. And I think Texas thinks about it too. That's how big that game is for each side. But again, I understand where he's coming from because I think there's schools we experienced in the Big 12 too. They think about beating us every day because we've been the standard. Texas right now, they're a top team in the country. We think about that too. We want to beat them. So Super Bowl is probably used loosely in regards to, whether or not opposing players want to think of a game, much. But at the same time, for him to kind of dive in and say, yeah, I've been thinking about beating Texas all offseason.
Yeah.
Kind of proves his point.
Yeah. I think there's 3 points there that I think of. On the Quinn, with the Nick Saban talking about Texas won't run the conference. It's funny when you're live at an event, guys, and then you see how the narratives take off. It was Kirk Bowles who asked Greg Sankey in the first news conference of the weekend. He said, and Kirk will ask leading questions quite a lot. And he asked, in the conference with Texas joining the conference, Kirk Bowles, of course, from the Austin American-Statesman, now with the Houston Chronicle. said, Texas had a reputation for running the conference they were in. And he was talking about behind the scenes.
Administratively.
Administratively. He was talking about being the bully and getting what you want and, telling, running the conference, which is what he was talking about. And, Greg Sankey answered the question. And then Nick Saban, that's when he reacted and said, I hear these people ask questions about Texas running the conference. They ain't going to run this conference. And I think Nick was talking about behind the scenes. Yeah. But everyone on this radio row that I'm sitting on took it as, what do you mean run the conference? They weren't even running the Big 12 as far as on the field. Oklahoma was running the Big 12 on the field. So just wanted to clarify for our On Texas Football live stream audience that it was Kirk Bowles that asked that question. He was referring to Greg Sankey about the behind the scenes stuff. And I do think Nick Saban's right. Texas is going to have to, fall in line and be a part of it because as Nick said, this is an arrogant conference, a lot of arrogance programs, and bring your arrogance. We'll match it, and we'll be right there. But to the conversation about Quinn and bulletin board material, it's been Texas is the conversation. Everybody wants to know about Texas. We've had our table set up here with the station I'm at in Austin. Got the signs up, and everybody wants to come up and talk about the Longhorns. How good are they? What are they bringing? That's good. I mean, that's where Texas wants to be. But as far as the Super Bowl thing goes, I mean, gosh, that's part of what we talked about at the beginning with all these teams that want to be in the playoff and want to take that opportunity with Nick Saban not being at Alabama anymore. Texas, there were schools, a lot of schools in the Big 12 outside of Oklahoma whose season was made by beating the Longhorns. I mean, they could lose 4 other games, but if they beat Texas, that was their season. That's not the case in this conference. It's really not. I mean, it's the bigger picture. Texas is just one team along the way, and that's kind of the big leagues Texas enters where – because I do think that was the case for so many. I mean, if Iowa State would beat Texas or Texas Tech, for crying out loud, would beat the Longhorns, that makes the season. The coach is safe. Everybody's good. TCU as well. That's not the case in this conference because everyone, or at least the top 10, 9-10 teams, are playing for the big picture, and Texas is just a part of that conversation. That's the fun part of what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Kirby Smart had another great line today, Aaron, and I'm sure you caught up on it as well. Humility is always 1 week away in the SEC.
Yep.
I thought that was a brilliant line because you hear about it. I mean, Texas experienced it more times than they should have against teams that they probably shouldn't have been close with in the Big 12. But when you enter the SEC, and we've talked about it, right? All those teams that are expecting some sort of contention for the college football playoff, he's absolutely right. There's no time to sit back and say, oh, thank goodness we got Tennessee this week. It's not a team that you can take lightly. I think Texas this year, looking at the schedule, maybe you can say that more times than you will be, but in future schedules after 2025, there's no way that you're going to be able to look back at a schedule that Texas has currently and say, oh, thank God it's looking like this again. Because you're going to have an Ole Miss, you're going to have a Tennessee, you're going to have a Missouri. All these programs are super competitive when it comes to the current age of college football. And they're not going to go away anytime soon with NIL being a big factor of roster, accumulation. So I thought that was brilliant. And to his point, Texas, they've been humbled a few times before. Keep that level mentality and keep that culture where it needs to go with the plan in place to go week by week. I think that's going to be very important.
100%. Rod, any thoughts on the conversation or we'll move to a new topic?
I just think Kirby Smart, he knows that ecosystem of the SEC well enough, right? He's the top dog, and he's telling you, humility is 1 week away. And getting back to Texas's time in the Big 12, even this past season, right? Go look at the 1-score games Texas was in. They were 3-2 in 1-score games last season, and that was in the Big 12. The Big 12's talent is not on par with the SEC talent. So the assumption is, Texas is going to win 10, 11 games. That is prediction. That's what I think too. But I wonder how many 1-score games they end up in. You were 3-2 in those 1-score games. Hell, if you want to go, 11-1 in the SEC, you might need to be undefeated or go 4-1. And you're probably going to have just as many. I think in Sark's last 2 years, Texas has gone, I believe it is 5-7 in 1-score games. So you got that many 1-score games in the Big 12. It only stands to reason you're going to have as many or close to it in the SEC. Now, I know Texas is going to be better, but the SEC and the level of competition is better. And then I start thinking about, fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives and how often Texas was in that situation. I mean, your 2 losses last year came down to, game-winning drives. a fourth quarter comeback against Washington that Texas couldn't quite get it done. So in the SEC, you're gonna have to, better convert in those situations. You're gonna have to be more successful in those types of situations. So I think that's kind of where you talk about the humility is 1 week away. I think it's the margin for error, and the margins are just so thin in the SEC for Texas, and in the Big 12. Think about it. Oklahoma was always your last big game before you played in the regular season, right? Unless you play in a championship game or you play in a BCS game or something like that. That was your last big game most of the time. 2008 Texas Tech game after that was a big game, and maybe some other games. But usually there's always a crescendo almost to the regular season for Texas. And then you start kind of working your way downhill toward the end of the season. And Mac Brown used to always split it up into 2 seasons. Well, the truth is now you got bigger games after Oklahoma than you've probably ever had. And that's going to continue to be the case. That is something Texas got to get used to too. They used to be able to almost be able to peak at that point and then finish out the season strong. That ain't going to be the case, because after Oklahoma, you got Georgia, and that Texas A&M game is going to be a mofo. Guarantee whether A&M's good or not, it's going to be hell going down there to Aggie land. So I think it's just so Brian Kelly was talking about this yesterday, whether Texas SEC ready. It's really about the grind of it, the week to week grind of it. Do you have the talented depth to deal with the inevitable injuries and, the talent advantage that, Texas had in the Big 12? You're still going to have that, but it's just not going to be as seismic. It's not going to be a huge disparity like it was against teams in the Big 12. And even teams in the Big 12, we saw, even with the talent advantage Texas had, still very close games coming down to the wire late. So I think the SEC is going to be a real test for Sark. There's a lot of questions I think the media is going to have for Sark in regards to Texas transition to the SEC. Us real Texas fans, we got different types of questions, right? We want to know about, hey, have you guys worked on, what are your thoughts about closing out games a little bit better instead of allowing teams to get back into games in the fourth quarter and make it so close when you get big leads? Is that something else that you're working on? We want to know about red zone offense. We want to know about third down offense. We want to know about, ball security. We want to know about things that we know are going to take Texas from being a great team last year to being the best team in the country and a national championship team. And the margins are going to be thin. You're talking about very small margins for take Texas from being great to being the best team in the country. And so that's the kind of stuff that I want to get to. I want to get to the meat. I want to ask Sark, what did you find out about red zone offense when you studied it? What NFL teams did you visit in the offseason? You always go visit to try to steal ideas and, to boost your creativity and innovation. He's famous for that. It's usually from the Mick Shanahan tree. So I got, I got questions. I know CJ does too. So that's why I'm always on CJ's timeline. I got questions about the meat substance of the season rather than the, all of the, really all the tradition and all the pageantry of the SEC. And that's great. I'm happy about it. But I want to talk about Texas as a football team.
Yeah. It's not the what, it's the how. Like, how are you going to take that next step is big. I like that message right there on the chat. Texas cannot play down to their competition this year. That's right. I agree with you, CJ. When I heard Kirby Smart say that, humility is a week away. It's an NFL mindset. It really is. And Sark can bring that too. Chris Jackson on that staff, Kenny Baker. Almost got to put that. I'd put that up in my locker room. Humility is a week away, guys. It is there. And especially if you want to achieve your goals, which is playing in the 12-team playoff, SEC championship game, those kind of things. And you got to have it. And to Rod's point about, the NFL mindset, it's a week-to-week conversation coming off Oklahoma to get ready for Georgia, then Vanderbilt. The one thing I'll say for Texas, and Shane Beamer on Monday from South Carolina was asked, and it was a good question and a good answer. He was asked, he came from Oklahoma to South Carolina. So he has a great visual and understanding of the difference between what the Big 12 was to what the SEC is. And he said the two biggest differences are the depth of talent. Like he said, when I was coaching tight ends at Oklahoma, there was one guy that on the other side, I had to make sure we knew who he was, what he was about. He could wreck our game. Big 12 or Big 12's that way. SEC, there's 3-4 guys that we got. I mean, the next guy up is really talented and can really play. And we see that. That's something the Longhorns will see over time in the SEC, where that's why the draft picks all come from the SEC. The top recruiting classes are all in the SEC. These teams load up on talent, not just on the first part of the depth chart, but behind it. especially with the transfer portal. The other part is Beamer said that the road environments that you have to play in are so difficult and so hostile. And this is where I go back to why Texas is optimistic and why the schedule is such a favorable thing. The toughest road environment, as you said, Rod, will be the Hornets' Nest at A&M. But Arkansas on the road has already been announced as 11. That's 11 in the morning. Shane Beamer specifically said the night environments on the road are the toughest. We know why. I mean, it's prime time. It's the tailgate all day and everything that goes with that. But Texas really may only have one of those really crazy, frenzied road environments. It's going to be A&M. It's going to be November 30th. They'll have everything to play for. They know where they are. The Michigan game obviously is early. That's 11. Arkansas 11. Vanderbilt's the other conference road game. They don't have those really trap, scary road games. I look at. Look, you call A&M a trap. That's just a rivalry game to me. Arkansas could be, and we'll see where Arkansas is with Sam Pittman. But it's already been announced as 11. So I'm not saying that's an easy game to win. It just doesn't come with the extra level of the environment that we saw a couple of years ago when Texas went up there for a primetime game and the frenzy that I was a part of. It was nuts. So that's another reason for optimism for Texas, that they don't have those. Oklahoma has those. Oklahoma's the one that's got to play at Auburn, and Oklahoma's the one that's got to play those sneaky games where they're maybe not the best team, but you got to go play there. They get Mississippi State here. Kentucky would be a weird place to play. It's here. For Texas, obviously Georgia's here. So really like the schedule and the way it stacks up for the Longhorns based on the conversations we've had here. Looking forward to that. Go ahead.
One thing I can chime in there, Aaron, is Kirby said it today. Jordan-Hare Stadium for Auburn is the toughest place in the country to play. Wow. I thought that was pretty interesting, right? Because we've seen those Georgia-Alabama games go back and forth. They got to play at, the Florida, the world's largest cocktail party every year. Not quite as unique as the Red Rivalry or Red River Shootout, but it's certainly something. Georgia's the last few years, as has Alabama, has gotten everybody's best foot forward, best environment. Texas got that in the Big 12. But to your point again, you never know which stadium is going to surprise you, whether it be Jordan-Hare, whether it be Bryant-Denny, whether it's you go down to Oxford or Tennessee or South Carolina, a really impressive road stadium. I think that's a great point. Texas doesn't see a sneaky road game like South Carolina or Kentucky or Mississippi State, right? You don't have those Iowa States or Kansas States in November where it's pitch black outside and you're looking around and it's 17-14 in the middle of the third thinking, what in the world is going on in this football game? Because it's not anything that we expected to happen beforehand. So I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, Clark Lee, Mr. Non-Charisma, that's the probably the toughest night road game outside of A&M. Texas will play in SEC play this year. If it is, I think we've seen the window that it's going to be an evening game at Vanderbilt, but they're not very good. He's made all kinds of coaching changes. And how about this, guys? Clark Lee hired Jerry Kill to be his assistant head coach. I love Jerry, but I always feel like that's the guy that's going to replace you when you get fired midseason, right? You've now brought in the guy that's ready to take over if you get off to, because they were 2-10 a year ago. If they get off to a bad start, Jerry very well could be in charge there at Vanderbilt. I don't know. I'm not trying to get people fired. Billy Napier, Clark Lee, these are the guys that are kind of on the hot seat as the season begins in the always difficult SEC. But great conversations right there. Looking for more tomorrow. 2 more days, obviously. Texas a part of it tomorrow. Billy Napier and Florida will be here tomorrow. Mississippi State and Jeff Levy, and Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. 4 wrap it up on Thursday, including that Texas A&M team we're obviously going to be focused on for the Longhorns on November the 30th. Down at College Station. That's a crazy one. I'll say this, another thing about new to the SEC. For Texas, it's not a huge deal as far as, because, when Texas plays a big home game, even in the Big 12, it became a huge game for Texas Tech fans or K-State fans, or, they would make it an appointment to come to Austin and be a part of it, be a part of the game and see the city. I was talking to the guys at Oklahoma here. Norman is not a destination spot. Tyler McComas, our friend from the Ref there in Norman, says they never sold out all of their road allotment of tickets.
That's
like
crazy.
They'd get like 35 Iowa State fans who would come in.
Wow.
So they're playing Alabama and Tennessee this year in Norman. They don't have hotel rooms. They do not know what to expect from this. Obviously, they can stay in Oklahoma City and then be 20, 30 minutes away.
Wow.
But it's crazy. They don't have the infrastructure for it. They're not ready for – it's funny that the Norman Chamber of Commerce is here trying to figure out how to grow because these new
Wow.
home environments for them, they're just not used to it. And when you've got Tennessee and those Vol fans, it's a pretty easy drive from Knoxville down to Norman. Obviously, Alabama will travel. I mean, it's the best traveling team in the country. That's they're concerned about their home games and how they're going to handle it on game day. They're just not used to that influx of people that don't ever come. They don't ever come. Texas
if you're in Norman right now, you can make a whole lot of money renting your place out. Airbnbs, like they ain't got hotel rooms. Hey, you come stay here at my place for the weekend, and all football season, you can make a lot of cash until they will build those hotels. If you build it, they will come, and they're gonna build it.
Yeah, that's why the Norman Chamber is here. I mean, we're at the Omni, right? Rob Rolling, the UT grad, is going to be up there going, okay, I'll build some hotels.
Exactly.
I'll build some hotels. We'll get all that built up. Paris Hilton's dad and that whole family.
Restaurants and stuff, and oh man, they're gonna be good. They're gonna be good when this is all done. I guarantee you.
Yeah, but you still have to be in Norman when the football season's over. So, they got to deal with that too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you get football season there, and then you can go other places. Airbnb trailers. This goes.
That's well said.
That was a softball. I shouldn't even. I just lofted that one up there. My bad, Sooner fans.
But that's a great idea. Oklahoma should embrace the brand, lean into it, CJ, and just put up like for the big games, put up like a field of RVs. Just run them out. Just run them out. Roll them out of there afterwards.
At Washington and Baylor, fans ride their boats up to the river and they're right on the stadium. You could do the same in Oklahoma. You just park the trailer right out front, stroll on in. It's about the same.
Dude, would that be the ultimate picture? That would be the ultimate picture of a big field of RVs or trailers just lined up. And that's Oklahoma Airbnb. You know what I'm saying? Just rent them out. Wow. But the Alabama fans would take them. That'd be great, man. They'd pitch some walkers and hang out, get ready for the game. But that's what they're worried about at A&M. And obviously the Georgia fans are already talking about October 19th and the weekend and how difficult the rooms are. F1 race is there in Austin that weekend. They're not real happy about that. They're having a hard time finding a way to travel to Austin because the dogs travel like no other. Looking forward to tomorrow. CJ, what, as Rod said, you like to get to the meat of the issue. What are the big questions you're looking forward to asking Sark about, Quinn Ewers about come tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we touched on it. I mean, what's been the emphasis this offseason? We've seen Texas improve on what was the glaring issue under Sarkisian each year. This year, we're expecting the red zone offense to be much better. I want to hear what's been emphasized this year. How will the helmet communication, now that you've had time to practice it in the spring, you've had time to rep it out some in the summer potentially as well. What is that looking like for you if you're Steve Sarkisian? What are the benefits? Will you still go fast? Don't give away your game plan, but what's your mentality? What's kind of the philosophy that you could see being implemented across college football? And then again, I mean, just, what's exciting about the SEC? Because we've heard it from everybody else about why it's fun that Texas and Oklahoma are joining the conference. For Texas and Sarkisian, I mean, you're here now. What's it feel like? How excited are you? You get to see Jeff Lebby, Brent Venables, Kalen DeBoer, all coaches that you're familiar with in years past. Well, now you're sharing a conference with them. So I want to see what that's like for them, and maybe an A&M question, because you never know. Those are always very fun for both sides.
Oh, yeah. Real quick, CJ, real quick update on the All-Star game. It's 3-3 NLAL. The star power has been good. Paul Skeens was 3 up, 3 down in the first for the American League. Shohei Ohtani hit a 3-run homer. Shohei went deep, 3-run park hopper. Also, Juan Soto raked a double that scored 2. It's 3-3. Good ball game so far down the street from where I'm at in Arlington, Texas. Baseball, real quick, CJ, for our audience, is another big pickup today. Texas got out of the portal. A kid named Connor McCreary from South Carolina, another guy coming in. The Longhorns have gotten some really good news this weekend as far as the draft. Obviously, they're going to lose Jared Thomas and a couple of shortstops that were prep shortstops, including the kid Theo Gallen from Austin, Texas, or Gillen, the Westlake shortstop. But Jalen Flores coming back to join Max Ballou and a pretty good core. And we know that Jim Schlossnagle, Max Wiener are really attacking the portal, both in the high school ranks and through veteran portal players. Yeah,
McCreary's another reliever in my eyes. 19 appearances this year, 22 and 2/3 innings pitched. Didn't have a great ERA, but at times was used as the closer, that late game situation guy from the right side of the mound. 8 portal arms being added to this Texas roster. I've mentioned it several times, but this is exactly like when Sarkisian and Flood got to Texas, looked at the offense line room and said, the hell is this, right? What are we working with right now? I think that's exactly what Max Wiener and Jim Schlossnagle have seen so far with their roster, going out and adding 8 arms, maybe another one on the way, but I've been very impressed. I don't think that Texas will see any of the 3 guys drafted in the first 2 rounds make it to campus out of the high school ranks. I think Jared Thomas is gone to the Rockies as well. LBJ and Tanner Witt are interesting because they have the option to return. LBJ drafted by the Rockies in the 5th round. Tanner Witt, I believe, in the 12th or 13th round. So they do have the opportunity to come back. Will they? We'll see. But hey, Jason Flores is coming to campus. He's the big-time guy that was expected to be drafted. He withdrew his name 2 days ago, I believe. So Drew Rarick, the kid from Fargo, North Dakota, throwing 95, 96 regularly. He's coming to campus as well. So a lot of talent returning to Austin next year. Should be very exciting. And one last note in recruiting. I know Kelshawn Johnson ended up siding with Texas A&M earlier this evening. Texas fans, don't fret because Jerry Hamilton, our good friend on Texas football, has a message for everybody. There's a high on the way. So, and it's a good one. It's a good one. So,
okay,
we'll end it on that one.
High on the way, on the heels of the kid from Spring Decaney, the tight end that committed yesterday. And I know there'll be more on that tomorrow morning on Coffee and Football here on the On Texas Football channel. Yeah, loading up on the arms. I think the comparison with Kyle Flood and the offensive line, very, very similar. And to our audience out there that maybe haven't seen it, our friend David Pierce is going to be, looks like he's signing on to be the assistant head coach at Texas State, which I think is pretty cool with Steve Trout. Coach Pierce, it's a comfort move for him. He probably could go chase a head coaching job somewhere after 3 trips to the College World Series in 8 years, but he's building a barn-dominium there in Austin on his property.
Nice.
He can stay and work with Coach Trout and still be around baseball. He may be a head coach somewhere else someday, but right now the best option for him was to stay in Austin, stay in Central Texas, go help Coach Trout, who's a friend of his, and he sees Coach Trout sees as a mentor and can help that program because Coach Trout lost one of his top assistants to Arkansas State, and so needed a spot, and David Pierce is available. I think that's pretty cool for him, and I think that's awesome. And Texas has Jim Schlossnagle now, and they're on their way into the SEC. Guys, good stuff. We're looking forward to tomorrow. We'll get a good night's sleep and watch the end of this All-Star game and be ready to go tomorrow. I know On Texas Football will be all over the developments of tomorrow. Rod, you and Coach Shipley tomorrow afternoon will probably have a lot of conversation surrounding what Sark says, what the Longhorn players say, and everything that happens on day 3 of SEC Media Days. CJ, Rod, have a good night. CJ, I'll see you tomorrow.
You too, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, everybody.